Excellent. Good morning and good afternoon. Don't know if we can test just to make sure our audience can hear us. If you have access to the chat or Q&A, if somebody wouldn't mind typing that in, just make sure we get started on the right foot here.
I think we can hear you, Mike.
Okay, Sarah, I see you're typing there. Excellent. Wonderful. Well, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to everyone who's joined. It looks like we've got almost nearly 200 colleagues that have been able to join this important call today. I'm very excited to be able to kick this off and help sponsor again this really important event for our Neurodivergence and Allies network. So for those that I haven't met before, my day job here at Parkland is as the VP Finance for our Supply, Trading, and Refining Division. I've been a Parklander for about 2.5 years. And this is a community which is actually very near and dear to my heart. So while I'm here as an ally, what I can say is in my nuclear family, every single member I would identify as being a member of the neurodivergent community. And if I look into my wider family as well, grew up with a number of family members who would identify as part of this community probably today. I think what's interesting is, growing up, these weren't necessarily terms that we all knew and used. And I do think there's a power in actually putting a name to something so that we can all talk about it, understand what we're talking about, and be able to work together to make the world, frankly, better for members of any diverse community. And particularly this one, I'd say from a personal perspective, and I'll talk about kind of the bad, the good, and the bad and the good of it, if you will. So on the bad side, I've seen firsthand, whether it's children or even a partner who's had to deal with the frustration, the pain of being extremely well intentioned, but somehow the world misunderstanding and perceiving of actions, particularly if you have attention deficit or even giftedness or dyscalculia, as an example, how the world may see you not as your well-intentioned self, but actually see you through the lens of the output of how your brain works. And the flip side, I've seen the value of how just simple, small actions of seeing someone, recognizing it, and being an ally for someone can mean the world to someone as well who's dealing with a world who has expressed frustration with them, and the deep bonds that can actually be formed by just taking these small steps as an ally to really understand someone. And on the positive, very deeply positive side, frankly, it's turned into an incredible gift for me to be surrounded by people who think differently. I will say, having both of the kids who've now gone off to university, and we don't have the benefit of sitting around having dinner with each other each night, I've lost an inner circle that's actually given me insights into the world that I never would have had myself had not been in an environment of being surrounded by gifted neurodivergent thinkers, if you will. And so for those who haven't had that experience, I'd highly encourage you to reach out and diversify your network, because there's a whole world of insight that you're missing out on when you don't surround yourself by people who think in a different way, or brains don't perceive the world in a different way than yours does. Um, this event has been the culmination of a lot of hard work. Our neurodivergent ERG is a relatively new addition to Parkland, and also has made tremendous contributions in how we're thinking about World Mental Health Day. As a fact, recent numbers show that almost 60% of companies are seeing an increase in the incidence of mental health claims. And I do think part of that is, finally having a name to put to things, but I think also the world itself, as we all know, is putting a lot of stressors against us. And some of those are internal in terms of our own expectations that seem to ever be going up. And at the same time, the world's got a lot of stressors which are occurring outside of our direct control, which, and again, being surrounded by neurodivergent folks in my family, one of their gifts is that they can feel the world in a way that I don't necessarily. And so when the world is stressed out and having a lot of challenging things going on, these are things that are felt deeply in the soul of the people that I care about around me. Our neurodivergent ERG is committed to highlighting both the strengths, as some of which you've heard me talk about, as well as teaching others about the differences and how to be how to be allies, but also how to advocate for oneself if you happen to be a member of the community. Team would like to see a world where there are no negative stigmas associated with neurodivergent people, and where society, and we start with our own portion of that society here inside of our company, can embrace and value and get the maximum value out of the unique minds and contributions of neurodivergent folks. As a bit of an aside, we obviously have had a Latino Heritage Month as well, and I want to thank the Latino Network for supporting our team and celebrating this with us. So it's my great pleasure to get to introduce our two guest speakers that we have today. So Sarah Darrell, who's the Inclusive Workforce Specialist at the Sinneave Family Foundation, who's joined by Amy Tatterton as well, who's the Director of Learning and Connection at the Foundation as well. And look forward to hearing their session and seeing how we can all continue to be allies and working together to improve our working conditions for our diverse staff. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a fantastic introduction. Thank you so, so much, Michael. Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to see now almost 350 of you. It is such an honor for Sarah and I to be here. Our presentation is titled Neuroinclusion in the Workplace, and let's just get right into it. We have a set amount of time and want to use it wisely. So, acknowledging the first stewards of the land in which we live, work, and play is an important part of reconciliation. In Canada, we just recognized the 4th National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which honors and recognizes the tragedy and multi-generational effects of the residential school system. Sarah and I are presenting from Mohkinstsis, which is the Blackfoot name for Calgary in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. In lieu of reading the standard land acknowledgement that you can see on the screen, which can sometimes be rote, repetitive, and lack meaningful reflections, Sarah and I are actually each going to share what we did this past September 30th for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So in my commitment to honoring Indigenous, Inuit, Métis perspectives, I spent time learning. In addition to my role at Sinneave, I also instruct at Bow Valley College here in Calgary. And I had the opportunity to engage with some content that talked about the intersection of academic integrity and indigeneity. And I came to learn that the mandates around academic integrity, particularly those with citing and referencing, are really rooted in Western, white, Caucasian, for-profit cultures. And the way in which we require students to demonstrate their knowledge, if they come from Indigenous backgrounds or take more of a storytelling approach, that they can actually be penalized due to the lack of correct citing and referencing standards. And so I spent my day marking and learning about and reflecting on how I can make sure that we respect and honor storytelling and the lived experiences of individuals, and when they bring those into their assignments, and to not be punished because they don't perhaps align with the very strict standards around referencing and citations. So that's how I spent my day. I'll pass it over to Sarah to share how she spent hers.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Amy. For myself, I started the book 21 Things You May Want to Know About the Indian Act, and that is by Bob Joseph. And that is so far I've learned it's a lot of different things I didn't understand about treaties and the connection to and how they've been implemented. So that learning for me has been really important, and I look forward to continuing the book and definitely recommend it as it's very well written.
All right, so Michael introduced us, but we're going to add a little bit more information about ourselves. So Sarah and I work at the Sinneave Family Foundation, or Sinneave, which is an operating foundation based in Calgary, Alberta, but works nationally. With stakeholders all across Canada to reduce barriers and enhance opportunities in education, employment, and housing for autistic and neurodivergent youth and adults. Our vision is that all people live, work, and thrive in their communities and realize their desired futures. So again, my name is Amy Tatterton. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Learning and Connection. I will say I give a lot of presentations, and I like to always say what gives me the right to share this information, what gives me the right or authority to talk about this topic. So I myself am part of a neurodivergent group, and I've also worked in the disability serving community for 15 years now. I have a bachelor's degree in community rehab and disability studies and a master's of education in educational research. I am personally and professionally really passionate about creating more accessible and inclusive spaces for everyone. So I have experience with younger students in educational settings and pediatric behavior intervention. I have experience in sport and now work in the transition to adulthood and those services. Sarah?
And my name is Sarah Darrell. My pronouns are also she, her, and I'm an inclusive workforce specialist here at the Sinneave Family Foundation. I also am a part of a neurodivergent community and group and identify that way, and have been at Sinneave for just over a year now, learning about more of their practices. But my background is rooted in sociology and the practice of people and community and that intersection, as well as having experience working with those within different abilities and communities that need additional support. So similar to Amy, I'm very passionate about this personally and professionally, and look forward to being a part of this presentation and here at Parkland today.
All right, so this is a brief overview of our agenda today. So we're going to provide an introduction and overview of neurodiversity as a concept, and we're also going to cover some intersectional considerations. And then we're going to introduce another concept, universal design, and talk about what we call a framework for neuroinclusion, including some really practical strategies that you could actually walk away from this presentation equipped to do something this afternoon or tomorrow to create more inclusive workspaces. We are also going to open the floor up to a discussion and Q&A period. Due to our time, we're not going to take any formal breaks, but we encourage our audience to do whatever it is that you need to do to support your learning in this presentation. If you need to stand, stretch, eat, drink, if you are going to use focus tools like I've got in my hands here, you are more than welcome to do so. It is also being recorded. And these are our learning outcomes. So this is what we're hoping you are going to walk away with today. The first is an enhanced understanding of the concept of neurodiversity, along with some terms. We're hoping that you're going to be able to identify where the principles that are a part of the framework can be used to increase inclusivity at Parkland and in your specific work context. And we're hoping that you're actually going to feel empowered to apply some strategies in your specific work context. With now almost 400 people in this presentation, nobody here has the same role, works in the same environment, works with the same team. And so we're hoping that the information we share with you, you can take it away and then apply it to your specific work context. We also want everyone to know here that you do not have to be a subject matter expert to support inclusive practices. We want you to feel comfortable starting the conversation with all stakeholders about neurodiversity, colleagues, team members, peers. There is also going to be a lot of information today. This isn't one and done. We're going to share our contact information at the end, but also accept that because of the volume of information around this topic, it's never going to be perfect. There is no such thing as the perfect, most neuro-inclusive workplace. The important thing here is that we're aware of it and putting efforts towards more inclusivity. We're going to be using an audience engagement tool today called Slido. If you're not familiar with Slido, it allows us to launch a few polls, even quiz those of you in the audience. So you can join using the QR code on the screen, or you can go to slido.com and enter P like Parkland 1977. no registration is required. But a fun fact, when I had to come up with the code for this session, I chose 1977 because it's the year that Parkland was founded. There will be a few opportunities to engage with our presentation content, but our absolute favorite feature of Slido is the ability to ask questions anonymously. And so you can actually submit a question that doesn't have your name attached to it if you feel a bit uncomfortable or feel like it's a silly question, even though there's no such thing. So you can use Slido not only to engage with some of our presentation, but also ask questions anonymously. You can also still ask questions in the Teams Q&A feature. On Slido, you can also upvote questions that others have asked, and at the end of the presentation, we will answer the ones that have been upvoted or liked the most. So we're going to get everybody practicing Slido right away with a little bit of a fun quiz. So the question here, and if you've joined Slido, you should see it on your screen if it's a device or if you're on your laptop. And the question is, if brains were like ice cream, what statement best describes neurodiversity? Is it one single flavor that everyone loves? A variety of flavors, each unique, and everyone enjoys them differently? Is it a flavor that only a few people can taste? Or is it an ice cream that melts if not eaten immediately? And we're just going to give everybody a moment to submit their answers. I'm also just going to pop slido.com, and then the join code is P1977. So that is in the chat as well. If you missed that QR code, it's on the left-hand side of the screen, but you can also go to slido.com. I can see that 90 of you have joined. Okay, we're going to give it one more second and see what everybody's answer is. Okay, overwhelmingly, the team here got the correct answer. If brains were like ice cream, what statement best describes neurodiversity? It's a variety of flavors, each unique, and everyone enjoys them differently.
And with that, thank you so much, Amy, for that introduction and getting us into Slido. So let's break down what neurodiversity is and get into some of the language. Breaking down the word, neuro is the brain and how it works. And diversity is simply means the difference or variation in people, things, it can be anything. And so together, neurodiversity is the difference in how people experience, process, make sense of, and respond to information. You can think of neurodiversity as a natural variation in the human condition, like height, skin color, voice, length of fingers, how high you can jump. All of these things are out of our control, but a part of who we are. And neurodiversity is a large umbrella that covers a lot of differences that are observed in the human condition. So everybody on this call is a part of neurodiversity because we all have differences in the way that our brain thinks about and processes information. Neurodiversity is a neurological difference among all people, and we are all neurodiverse. It's normal for our brains to process information differently, and it's normal for our nervous systems to function in multiple ways. It's normal for our bodies to have varying sensory experiences. Neurodiversity overall is a strength, and it contributes to our differences in the world. So to break down a couple more definitions that you might hear us reference throughout the presentation, if neurodiverse or neurodiversity refers to the broad general difference that we see across people, neurodivergent refers to an individual or specific group. So for example, you might think of autistic people, ADHD, or other learning differences. Those people are neurodivergent with a particular form of diversity. And in turn, neurotypical is a term that refers to anyone who is not neurodivergent. And the reason for differentiation there is that neurotypicals think and process information in a way that is considered standard or typical in society. Then we have neuroinclusion. So that's specifically in the workplace setting is what we're speaking about today. And that's all about creating a culture that fosters individuals and setting up the structure needed to provide lasting change. So overall, just creating a space where people can authentically show up and be themselves and be accepted in their workplaces.
So, knowing we have a global audience today, it seemed appropriate to share the global context of neurodiversity as well as other intersectional considerations. First of all, research on the concept of neurodiversity and neurodivergent groups tends to be concentrated in Western, high income settings and disproportionately among white or Caucasian children and families. There has, though, been an enormous amount of progress in challenging and providing alternative and intersectional narratives to the dominant framework of the medical model, which Sarah will explain shortly. And it appears in the research that there has also been some progress in ethnic minority reporting practices and cultural adaptations being used to identify forms of neurodivergence. Full transparency, there may be some of you in the audience who have thought to yourself, everyone seems to be neurodivergent these days. Everyone has ADHD, everyone is autistic or seems to be on the autism spectrum. Maybe you've even thought to yourself, people just want to be seen as special or are lazy or avoidant. It is true that more people are being diagnosed with different forms of neurodivergence. This is a result of increased awareness, increased acceptance. People are proud of their neurodivergent identities and sharing it loudly, as well as our diagnostic tools are becoming more sensitive. We are finally discovering what these brain-based differences can look like in women, in people who are non-binary, in people who are frankly not a young white boy being disruptive in a Western typical classroom. There are still many limitations to people receiving a formal diagnosis, and this is why we at Sinneave advocate for and support the concept of self-identification as well as universal design, so people don't need to be diagnosed formally, or if they are, disclose that in order to be supported. Cisgendered males tend to be diagnosed at a rate of about 4 to 1 when compared to cisgendered women across multiple forms of neurodivergence. But recent reports show that this number could be closer to 3 to 1, 2 to 1, and I would not be surprised in my lifetime if we even see it as 50-50 as we increase in our understanding. There are also greater rates of gender and sexual fluidity among neurodivergent groups. We also know that many cultures did not adhere to a gender binary before being colonized and have roots of much more gender fluidity within their culture. All this to say, the rates of neurodivergence across the world remain when cultural factors are accounted for as a controlled variable. For example, the use of eye contact has been pathologized in Western cultures and is sometimes even used as an indicator or marker for an autism diagnosis. But in some cultures, eye contact can actually be considered rude or even threatening. Again, all to be said, the whole world is neurodiverse and neurodivergence exists across all cultures and demographics. And when we say neurodivergent groups, this is some of what we're talking about. Again, everyone's neurodiverse, and when people have shared characteristics or differences that deviate from what we consider neurotypical, they may fall within one of these neurodivergent groups. These are just some examples, not all of them. An example that I like to share here is that historically, being left-handed would have actually been on this chart, and it was considered a disability. Parents and educators would force tools into the right hands of their children and students who were demonstrating a left-handed preference. We no longer consider left-handed people to be disabled. However, left-handed people are still disproportionately impacted by their environment, and I'd go as far to say that they can be disabled by it. People are born neurodivergent, you're born left-handed, but they are often further disabled by the demands of and the attitudes of the people within the environments they are. And because it is World Mental Health Day, I have to emphasize that these are not mental health conditions. Because neurodivergent people are operating in a neurotypical world, they often land in environments that challenge their ability to be successful. Therefore, neurodivergent people are statistically at a greater risk of adverse mental health challenges. And it's not because they aren't capable. Some mental health challenges do have a genetic component, but mental health challenges can develop or be exacerbated due to a mismatch between somebody's skills and the demands of their environment. So this pathway on the screen, at the very top, it indicates that there's a neurodivergent difference. Somebody has a brain-based difference that deviates from what we would consider to be typical or the norm. And then what happens in the workplace and at school, and sometimes even in their home, is that they face a lot of confusion and frustration because despite their best efforts, they can't seem to find success. This can also lead to masking, where they actually mask certain traits about themselves to appear more neurotypical. When this is persistent and ongoing across somebody's lifespan in multiple environments, it can lead to reduced self-efficacy and self-esteem, increased anxiety, learned helplessness, learned hopelessness, and then we see a higher rate of adverse mental health challenges. So our goal is to interrupt this pathway just under neurodivergent difference to reduce the amount of confusion, frustration, or need to mask that some people may find in their workplaces.
And with that, we want to expand on the intersectionality and the connection to the paradigm shift that we've seen. So since the 90s, there has been a significant shift in the way that we think about and speak about neurodivergent individuals. During the increase in neurodivergent diagnosis, again, which happened in the 1990s, there was a large focus on the medical model of neurodiversity and what it means to be neurodivergent. The medical model focused on the individual disabilities, their specific needs, and the deficit that cognitively different people face. This model often led to low expectations of people, loss of independence, exclusion in many spaces, including work, and generally a lot of stigma around how someone with cognitive differences could be productive or a quality member of society. And so today, the paradigm shift to the social model of disabilities allows for a more positive and inclusive discussion to happen around what these brain-based differences mean. The social model emphasizes collective support to help people overcome aspects of their disability. As Amy has mentioned, a lot of what happens within being neurodivergent is the environment continuously disabling you or expecting you to change and be different than who you are. So the social model aims to remove barriers and create equality and equity for people with disabilities to reach their fullest potential in society. And so we recognize today more than ever before that disability mainly arises from societal barriers rather than attributing disability purely to somebody's differences. And as Amy mentioned as well, the social model also increases our understanding of the intersectionality that neurodiversity or being neurodivergent has. So within the medical model, many studies and diagnostic tools were centered around young, westernized white boys, and this was limiting our ability to see how symptoms and experiences manifested in other groups, such as women, people of color, and older adults. And the social model now has a broader view of what different neurodivergent groups can look like. And with that, we do want to talk about what are these differences that we're discussing or alluding to today. There are differences that you may see in neurodivergent workers or people that you interact with, which many people at this point do not quite understand. And we believe, and from our own perspectives, as well as from research and self-advocate groups, that the lack of understanding of these differences is contributing to high levels of unemployment, pay disparity, and undue discipline within the workplace. So as we go through through some of these differences you might see, I want you to keep in mind that these are not true for every neurodivergent person, and these differences can be more noticeable in response to things, certain situations, increased stimuli, or somebody just having an off day. Or somebody who's neurodivergent may not show any of these things. So we're just giving you some examples of where people are facing some of these barriers and why these differences exist. So if we start off with executive functioning, this one tends to be what we focus on in the workplace quite a bit, as it refers to the cognitive skills used for managing for managing yourself. And so when we think about executive functioning, we're talking about attention, so the ability to attend to relevant details, initiation, the ability to start an activity in a timely manner, organization, which is the ability to compile and maintain information, planning, the ability to set goals and manage tasks, and time management, so the ability to estimate the time needed to complete a task. And all of these, again, relating to executive functioning, are really prominent in the workplace, and people with neurodivergent differences may have issues in these areas. For example, someone who has ADHD tends to have a different ability for focus. So maybe they need to break things up into chunks, or maybe they need more time to do something to a quality standard, but they need the ability to make changes in these spaces and changes to the structure instead of making changes to themselves to be successful. And when we talk about social differences, this may include difficulty deciphering non-implicit clues related to communication, like voice inflections, eye contact, body language, or abstract language like similes, metaphors, personification, and sarcasm. For behavioral difference, you may see repetitive speech or movement. This may look like somebody having to ask questions consistently, or they seek a verbal and physical routine that's unchanging. There may be repetitive actions and questions again, and this could easily be misinterpreted as threatening and for some people who are interacting that way. You may see focused interests, so somebody knowing a lot about a certain topic, and there is quite a myth, for example, with autistic individuals being very interested in math or science, but that's not true for all autistic people. Focused interest is something that can show up in all different areas and subject matters. And also sensory differences. So somebody may be hypersensitive or hyposensitive to noise, touch, lights, or sound. And then lastly, with literal thinking and communication. These differences, again, feel challenging in the workplace because we communicate so much. But people with neurodivergent differences often interpret language more literally than a neurotypical person does. They may have challenges deciphering what the underlying meaning of words and phrases are, just because we tend to use jargon, acronyms, or typical sayings within Western culture that some people may not have been socialized to understand. And so before we get into some statistics, we want to see what the thought of what percentage of the world's population is neurodivergent. So you can join Slido again by scanning that QR code or going to the website and entering P1977. So again, the question being, what do you think the percentage of the world's population that is neurodivergent is? And there's an option of 1% to 3%, 32%, 15% to 20%, or 5%. Who would like to answer, and then we'll jump and reveal that and share a little bit more about these statistics. All right, we're at about 80 people have responded, so I'll go ahead and reveal what the answer is. So 50% has the correct answer. It's about 15 to 20%. And so we'll move into talking a little bit more about that now. It is true that about 1 in 5 people identify as neurodivergent. And so if you think about the context of Parkland, given that there's over 4,500 staff, this may mean over 900 members of this team is neurodivergent in some capacity. And this is not us saying that you should attempt to identify and find out who that includes, but to say that neurodiversity is relevant to all current employees, especially on this call today, for the the simple fact that you're already working alongside neurodivergent people. And one of the most significant barriers that neurodivergent people face is the lack of understanding of neurodiversity. So we're really glad that you're here today, and as an organization, you're interested in this topic. Because despite how common it is, neurodivergent talent continue to face barriers and discrimination at work. And the result of that is high levels of unemployment, underemployment within neurodivergent communities, pay discrepancy, and undue discipline within the workplace. So let's wrap up this kind of space with a little bit more definitions that we'll reference in the latter half of our presentation. So why are we talking about this in the workplace is not just because 1 in 5 people or 20% are neurodivergent, but often people become disabled within the workplace because of the need to disclose their differences. So normally to get access to an accommodation, which is a modification for your work and the things that you're able to do within the workplace or how you get your tasks done, people need to disclose their disabilities. And they can be met with a lack of understanding, lack of knowledge of how differences impact them, or plain discrimination. So like Amy mentioned, we encourage organizations to make a list of common adjustments that are actively being used, that are simple changes to make, and allow people to access them without disclosing their disabilities, and simplify the accommodation process for those things that are a little bit more complex, so that people can still have access to make changes to their job to increase their success within the workplace.
So to set the stage for the framework that we're going to be talking about, and from all of the fantastic information that Sarah's just provided us, we're going to make sure that we all have a shared understanding of what universal design is. So the graph on this slide, we're going to start at accessible design. So accessible design is where something is designed. It could be a physical space, but it could also be the format of a meeting, or the guidelines that a organization creates to discover a workplace's culture. This accessible design approach addresses the needs of people with disabilities. It is an afterthought. So things are developed or built or discovered, and then making them accessible or ensuring that they meet the needs of people with disabilities is called accessible design. Inclusive design considers the full range of human diversity and addresses all needs. It considers a broader range of user diversity and the full range of human diversity. What we're aiming for, though, is universal design. This means that it's usable by all and no adaptation is needed. Universal design seeks to create environments and products that work for everyone naturally with no further need for adaptation. So the example that I like to share when explaining universal design is your common door. An accessible door would be a door that has a knob handle and can be opened when activated by a push button that is at a wheelchair height. So it's very likely that the door was built, a knob handle was put on, and then afterwards, someone was like, oh shoot, there's a group of people that can't get through this door. So now we're going to add a push button to meet the need of people with disabilities, and we're going to put that button at wheelchair height. Not actually inclusive or universally accessible for everybody. So an inclusive design of a door would be a door with a push bar opening instead of a knob handle, and a hand wave motion sensor instead of a push button at wheelchair height. This then makes the design more accessible and inclusive to a wider range of the diversities that we see among humans. Universal design can be a lot more challenging to think of because not a lot of things are designed universally. We sometimes have to think about universal design as things that we haven't actually seen yet, but doors we have seen. So an example of universal design for a door would be wide automatic doors with wide range motion sensors so that it is usable by all and no further adaptation is needed. So based on those definitions, I think this is the last quiz we have for you. Which example of a workplace communication tool best represents universal design and the definition I just provided? Is it having video conferencing software with live captioning? Is it having a simplified, intuitive interface for all team collaboration tools with a variety of options that is easy to navigate regardless of someone's technical skills or experience and uses clear language? Is it a team communication platform offering multiple formats for interaction? Or I think I really am showing my age when I created this quiz. Is it MSN Messenger? So go ahead and select which answer in Slido that you think best represents universal design pertaining to a workplace communication tool. We'll give everybody a moment. All right, Sarah, let's see what they had to say. Correct. A simplified, intuitive interface for team collaboration tools. The other answers aren't wrong. Maybe MSN Messenger is wrong, but video conferencing software with live captioning, I would say that that's accessible design. The video conferencing software was developed and then the light bulb goes off in someone's head saying, oh, this isn't inclusive to people who are hard of hearing. I feel like a few people are selecting MSN Messenger. Maybe it's made advancements recently, I don't know, or it doesn't exist. But that would be more accessible design. And so we want to look at a workplace communication tool that at the outset is considerate of the widest range of needs that we see among the entire human population.
And so with that, we want to introduce you to the 6 principles. And this is a framework that we hope will increase your confidence in reducing barriers for autistic and neurodivergent people within your workplace. These principles, which you can see on the screen, are flexibility, environment, structure, communication, connection, and emotion. And these were created within the Sinneave Family Foundation in partnership with a group of autistic self-advocates who were asked the question, what would you want employers to know about autism? And this feedback from the group, as well as external research, best practices, resulted in the 6 principles being created. And these principles are designed to be generalizable to all people so that individuals are not required to diagnose or disclose a diagnosis, in order to be supported. And so while you may not directly implement the 6 principles into your organization as an overall framework, we suggest using these principles to look at your organization's policies, procedures, workplace cultures, and the interactions you have with each other to see if there are any barriers that may be impacting neurodivergent individuals or a broader range of people.
So in the interest of time, we are going to kind of fly through the 6 principles. We're going to talk about why they're a principle, what's important to know about the principle, and some of the key takeaways. Again, we are not going anywhere. You can contact us after the fact. We also have quite comprehensive one-pagers. I did tell my team that just because you make the font small enough to fit on one page doesn't mean it's a one-pager. So it is one piece of paper front and back that goes into each principle in more depth. But this is where, from our learning objectives, we are hoping that you are going to think about the principles we're sharing and then think about your specific work context and where you could actually go again this afternoon or tomorrow or next week and make a small ally-based action that makes your workplace more inclusive. So the first principle we're going to talk about is environment. Many people experience sensory stimuli differently than other people. A common difference is sensory over-responsivity. That's acute, heightened, or excessive sensitivity to sensory stimuli, or under-responsivity. That is slow, minimal, or no response to sensory input. The difference is not to do with the functioning of the sense organ, but the way the brain processes incoming sensory information. So the principle of environment refers to the impact that the work environment has on our senses. Neurodivergent people may have a more sensitive sensory system, and it's important to know that some neurodivergent brains do not filter the sensory environment the way a neurotypical brain does. So what's important to understand about this principle is that high sensory environments can adversely impact focus and productivity, and that everyone has different sensory needs. Filtering out unwanted sensory stimulation can be difficult, but know that sensory concerns can be distracting, nauseating, and they can even be painful for people. So if I'm in a room where there's a projector and the projector has a fan in it and the fan is making like an auditory buzz noise, I might be able to filter that out. Somebody else may not be able to and find that really painful, nauseating, or distracting, impacting their ability to focus. And so what we want to do is find a solution. Can we ask that person or advocate for ourselves about sensory sensitivities ahead of meetings or going into new environments? Can you share information about the environment? Lights are dimmable or they aren't, so you may want to come prepared for that. And always take concerns seriously and at face value, and take steps to address it. You may not be able to find the perfect solution to address sensory sensitivities in every environment. We know that it is not realistic to go and change out all of the fluorescent lights. And so the point here is to create psychological safety so that people feel empowered to address sensory sensitivities in the environment that may be affecting them at work, and have a really productive conversation and feel supported in addressing the sensitivities or concerns, whether that's through an individual adaptation or through one where you actually address the environment.
And the next principle we'll talk about is structure. So providing structure means offering clarity about what is needed to complete an activity or interaction. Structure is a result of being specific about your expectations, about how things should be organized, and how things work within your organization, and how things should be carried out and actioned. When the appropriate amount of structure is in place, individuals are set up for success and can showcase their skills. Structure and routine are important for everybody, but neurodivergent people more typically thrive in environments that provide structure. So that includes consistency, planning, and monitoring of success. And some examples of structure and routine in the workplace are things like policies and procedures, templates, office hours, organizational charts, dress code. So these are all things that we already do. And these types of structures promote clarity and expectation that can offer opportunity for predictable routines, like we mentioned in behavioral difference in neurodivergent individuals. Structure can also help people prepare and adapt to change, which we'll talk about in a moment. So what do we recommend when it comes to some takeaways from structure? How can we use structure to improve workplace inclusion? Imagine that you're working with a team of your colleagues on a particular project, and adding structure to this work can help improve success. So that might look like explaining what use of formats is needed, and maybe that's written, verbal, visuals. You're using plain language and instructions, so reducing acronyms. You're considering creating a dictionary of commonly used industry terms. You're also inquiring about types of structure that people need to work in different situations. So the structure needed for working in a team might look different than the structure needed for somebody independently working. And lastly, you can plan together on how to add needed structure. So again, that could look like creating templates, rubrics, examples of historical work, outlines, and overall just outlining what success looks like and how somebody can achieve that.
So we like to say that structure and flexibility are kind of like two sides of the same coin. They are similar but different, and definitely can interact with each other to create more inclusive workplaces. The principle of flexibility refers to the ability to adapt to changing circumstances and new ideas. Flexible environments are those that provide people multiple pathways in order to achieve goals and find success. When environments are flexible, greater numbers of people will be successful. Like I said, structure and flexibility work in parallel. And so flexibility, being the ability to adapt to change, is going to differ from person to person. But know that unexpected change in routine can be difficult to manage for some people. In the principle of structure, setting up structure and frameworks to promote success can also help reduce anxiety in people. They're coming into situations knowing what to expect. And when unexpected changes happen, it can be really difficult to process or manage that. Like I said, structure and flexibility work in parallel, and changing routines and thinking habits can be challenging. So that's just something to understand about neurodivergent people. They may have more concrete or black and white thinking, or there might not be enough information to understand why the flexibility is needed or why there is a change. So as much as possible, provide advanced warning of change. If there is a standing meeting every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. and it happens in the same boardroom, but now the boardroom temperature is fluctuating and it's not an appropriate meeting space anymore, can you provide as much advanced warning of where the meeting is now going to be located? Do you need to provide any information about the differences in that environment versus the other boardroom? And then offer clear explanations for the change. People are going to be much more understanding about why something needs to change, and they need to be flexible to adapt if they understand why. It's always great to brainstorm and collaborate with colleagues and share different perspectives and examples, find ways to adapt to the change, and understand that adapting to change can sometimes take time. Everyone processes things at a different pace.
The next principle, being emotion, for me is one of the most complex ones. And when we're talking about the principle of emotion, we're acknowledging a few key ideas. We are all experiencing a range of emotions. Different emotions, different experiences produce different emotions. And how we experience and express an emotion differs across people. So, as a result of our differences in emotional experiences, reactions, and interpretations, we have to all accept that people's emotional expressions may or may not align with what you're expecting at any given time. Because of all these differences of how we're interpreting, reacting, and seeing emotions, emotions can be easily misunderstood and create a mismatch between the situation or understanding of each other within a situation. And I could talk about this for a long, long time, but of course, given our time, I'll move to some of these takeaways. The first being is to don't take things personal, and that is quite challenging, but especially in the workplace context and the variety of what's appropriate emotionally versus what somebody may actually be feeling means that we may feel like people don't like us, they're angry with us, they're being disrespectful. But really just take time to take a breath and try your best to stay neutral in your reaction to or your response to people's emotion. Be curious and ask people what they're feeling and why. Don't just assume you know how they're feeling, and don't assume people know how you're feeling. And provide time and space. So taking time away from a conversation, a project, a piece of work when appropriate, and arrange a better time to check in and just devise and diffuse some of what those feelings may be can be a great approach to emotional reactions within the workplace.
So I personally love talking about communication, and as you see, Sarah and I are going back and forth, and I actually switched so that I could talk about communication. And it's also it's one of the principles that I am actively working on right now. So communication is a principle. It refers to the way we exchange information, whether that's verbal, written, visual, or other. Communication creates shared understanding, it enables collaboration and productivity, and it also serves to deepen personal and professional relationships. However, not everyone communicates in the same way. Neurodivergent individuals may process incoming information, whether it's verbal, written, or otherwise, in different ways than neurotypical people, and these differences can impact communication across all settings. Many neurodivergent people are more likely to think, speak, and hear literally. They usually listen for narrative, read into a conversation subtext or intention. And so these differences in how we're interpreting communication can make things like small talk and social chit chat very confusing for those who are neurodivergent. So, what's important to understand about this principle is that communication changes based on the people communicating. And a lot of our communication is based on nonverbals, including context, tone, and gestures. And as a result, communication breakdowns can happen really easily. So in Western cultures, if I say I love winter, or if I say I love winter, I said the exact same words, but because of my eye roll, my tone inflection, gestures, the meaning of that sentence completely changed. And this is one of the most concrete ways I think is showing how these strategies and principles are universally designed is that it can be challenging for neurodivergent people to pick up on these nonverbals, these tone inflections, context, gestures, but it can also be really challenging for people who are not from Western cultures, people who are learning English as a second, third, or fourth language, people who may have low literacy. And the best example that always gets a laugh is imagine you are learning English for the first time and you come to find out that a butt dial and a booty call are two very different things. And when we use this type of non-concrete, non-specific language, including idioms and acronyms, like we mentioned, it can make our communication really inaccessible, not only to neurodivergent people, but also to people who have low literacy, people who are learning English as another language. And so the recommendations or takeaways when it comes to communication is always be as clear and specific as you can. Say what you mean what you say. If you say, I want that by EOD, does that mean end of December? Also, what if your end of day seems to be like around 8 p.m., but my end of day seems to be around 4 p.m.? So be as clear, concrete, and specific as you can be when providing information and instructions. Ask about how people want to communicate. We like to embrace what's called multimodality or multimodal communication. If you say something verbally, how about also putting it in an email and writing it down and sending it to somebody? If there is a workplace social event, communicate it verbally, send it over email, but also put up posters, maybe in the office that people will see. The more manners or modalities in which you put out communication, the more people you're going to catch in that communication, in seeing it and understanding it clearly. And don't assume people understand you. Ask questions, confirm that understanding. And if you are on the other end of that and feeling confused about a piece of information, ask clarifying questions, or if they can explain it in a different way. And sometimes we just need to give time to process. Sometimes people hear information for the first time and they might not have questions right away, but they might have questions later on. So give time to process and maybe book a time to follow up on the information to make sure it was understood.
And the last principle is connection. So, similar to emotion, there's a lot that goes into connection, and that refers to the inclusion of people at the social or cultural level in an organization. So, a lot goes into how we connect. That can be nonverbal, unwritten social rules, cultural norms, relationship dynamics, power dynamics, and many neurodivergent individuals can find it difficult to pick up on, again, these unwritten social rules and connection pieces. So, for takeaways, we really recommend that you don't judge and you assume good intention, especially when somebody tries to have a social interaction with you or puts out a social bid and maybe it's not what you're expecting, but really try your best to not be judgmental. Assume that their intention is good and how they're trying to connect with you, unless there's reason to believe otherwise. Second, be curious. Again, we've talked about this, but ask people what they're thinking. Ask people how they would like to connect or what works best for them. And then continue to include everyone. So continue to allow people the opportunity to have these social engagements and connections and settings that work best for them. Because majority of people do want workplace connections, but the path to get there can be different or challenging for some people. So as Amy mentioned, we do have the 6 principles on our website, which we'll send in a follow-up for you to access. All of them have additional pages and explanations and examples of how to use and break down the 6 principles. And so to quickly close, we did want to show that you can apply the principles in a specific scenario all at one time. There's so much intersection between the 6 principles, how they work and how you apply them, and there's lots of different ways to do so. So again, our recommendation is using these principles of environment, structure, flexibility, emotion, and communication to see where somebody might have barriers, what issues are coming up for your workplace, and just allowing that grace of understanding that neurodivergent differences may be impacting any of these areas at any given time. And with that, of course, we've come to 12. And so we thought we'd have a little bit more time to answer some questions. But what we will do is commit to answering these and following up with an email. So we'll be able to go through all these, give you a document that can be shared throughout the organization with our answers to these. So I apologize that we're not able to do it live, but you will get the responses here as well. And just to close.
Sorry, I did answer a few of them, Sarah, just in type. So
Perfect.
There are some answers provided in Slido. The Slido doesn't close automatically, and so you can definitely go and view the answers we've provided. But like Sarah said, if you want to fire in a question right now and we don't necessarily get to it right away, we have a practice of following up in a written document that can just get sent to everybody what our answers are to those questions. But you can also stay in the Slido and review the answers I've provided in writing to the questions that your colleagues have anonymously asked.
And if you do have time and would like to give Amy and I feedback, we always appreciate hearing how our sessions went, how the information was received, and anything we could do to make it more enjoyable or educational for you. So feel free to scan this QR code. And again, we'll follow up with a link for you to distribute and receive throughout the organization. So thank you all for joining, and we really appreciate you having us here today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sarah and Amy. I'll keep it short, given the time. Excellent presentation. I love the back and forth as well. Lots of great content to really make this practical. Thank you to the over almost 300 attendees that we had in the session as well, and look forward to carrying on the conversation. If you see me around Calgary or one of your locations and want to chat about it, please hit me up. Thanks all.
Hello, my name is Krista Weir and I am neurodivergent. I am a co-lead for the ERG for neurodivergency here at Parkland, and I'm so excited to get to work with the Sinneave Family Foundation and all of the amazing work that they do.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Blair. I'm a solution architect that works with the IT team. I've been with Parkland for almost 9 years now. I am a co-founder and co-lead of the Parkland Neurodivergent ERG, and I am a late diagnosed neurodivergent with ADHD and OCPD.
Hi everyone, my name is Bailey and I have been with Ontario's commercial group for just under 5 years, and I am a late diagnosed neurodivergent. So as you can appreciate following today's presentation, neurodivergence is a very large and nuanced topic, but it's also very unique and very personal to each individual and their own lived experience. With that, I'd like to share a little bit about my own personal experience and what neurodivergence looks like for me in my workplace environment. So with my neurodivergence comes intellectual playfulness, which is my greatest gift, but can also be my greatest struggle if I don't give it the proper care and attention. So what does it mean to be intellectually playful? I have a general curiosity about understanding the world around me, And I find acquiring and applying knowledge very pleasurable. So my mind actually allows me to use connected knowledge networks by using pattern recognition or intellectualizing processes, theories and systems in their direct application, and then finding ways to then tailor and cater them to the conversation or business problem that's at hand. Essentially, it's a creative problem-solving method that allows you to take knowledge from one area and one discipline and apply it to another, and obviously cater in a pragmatic and practical way. So the struggle often resides in trying to explain how I got from point A to point B without losing my audience in convoluting and confusing details, pathways, etc. So this is where that communication principle really comes in strong. As a neurodivergent, it's important that I work on finding effective ways to appropriately articulate my process and ideas to my team. And with that, there really is no one size fits all. It's rather just showing the importance of establishing clear lines of communication right off the start to ensure that all parties are aligned and on the same page. Again, as I'm sure you can imagine, the situation is a lot more nuanced than what I'm able to get into right now. But just as a quick example, this is what neurodiversity looks like for me in my workplace. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's speaker session. If you'd like more information, please find the Neurodivergent ERG up on PATH. Or if you're interested in signing up for the Neurodivergence ERG, please scan this QR code. You can also find information on signing up on the PATH also. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are.